Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Anson and Paul's Big Movie Podcast. I'm Anson Chan.
I'm Paul Morgan.
And today we are watching Funny Games.
And The Cabin in the Woods.
And The Cabin in the Woods, yes. Paul, what would you like to start with today?
Dealer's choice, go for it.
Ooh, Dealer wants to start with Funny Games.
All right. Do you want to take this or do you want me to do it?
I could try to do Funny Games.
All right, go for it.
Funny Games is a movie about a family starring Naomi Watts as Anne, Tim Roth as George, and Michael Pitt as Paul. All right, no. Don't
forget Brady Corbett.
Brady Corbett?
He plays Peter.
Peter, okay. Sorry, I was looking for the kid's name on IMDb.
I don't know.
And some kid, also starring Michael Pitt and Brady Corbett as Paul and Peter, the strange, quirky, polite, murderous neighbors who somehow have some weirdness going on about them.
Yep.
The movie starts when Naomi Watts and Tim Roth and her son get paid a visit by Michael Pitt and Brady Corbett, who want to borrow some eggs. After that, all hell breaks loose when a golf club is used to break the leg of Tim Roth. There's a desperate attempt for survival and escape, and yeah, it is a horror thriller that kind of is a meta-analysis of the genre as a whole. Is that correct?
Yes, it is specifically said by director Michael Haneke that he wanted to comment on the state and the glorification of violence in media.
Fair enough. And this also, I guess should be noted, is it takes place in like a lake house area, like a big lake where all the rich folk live. You know, where the nice cabins are. They have really nice little sailing boats around. Those type of people.
Yep.
So it's definitely meant to shock the well-to-do, affluent white person. Is that also fair to say?
Yes, I would agree. That is part of the intent here.
Okay. Well then, Paul, what did you like? Or rather, did I get it all?
I think you got it all. I just want to proceed from here by saying there's going to be some spoilers, and I would personally encourage a lot of people to see this movie, but I'm going to spoil it a lot when we talk about it. So
okay.
I think it bears mentioning. I don't think you forgot this necessarily, but the musical motif within the movie is the song Bonehead by the band Naked City, famously fronted by fusion musician and writer extraordinaire John Zorn. That's one of my favorite bits of this movie is that song. It just seems to really sell the movie in a lot of ways. But yeah, that was the only thing that I think I would add.
Awesome. Well, with that being said, what worked for you, Paul, in Funny Games?
All right, so I think this is kind of a masterful piece of cinema. First off, it's meant to be a commentary on violence and sex in movies and the way in horror movies people are subjectified and objectified. But despite that, you see very little of the violence. The only thing that you see blatantly in full view, in full frame, is this is where the spoilers begin. At one point, the character Peter is shot with a shotgun, and that's the only piece of violence you really see in full frame. You don't see the death of the child on screen. You don't see the stabbing of Tim Roth on screen, nor do you see his eventual death. You don't really see a clear view of Tim Roth's leg being broken. When they make Naomi Watts take off her clothes, you don't see her nude. You just see a tight shot of her face the entire time. It's really kind of masterful in that way because despite all of those things happening and all those things being very uncomfortable, you don't really see any of them on screen. The only, it really focuses on the emotional discomfort of the victims, which I think is almost more horrifying than anything they could have shown violence-wise or coercion-wise. I really like the way they make the bad guys, Michael Pitt and Brady Corbett. I really like the way they start them out relatively tame, like in the first couple scenes in which they appear. What they're essentially doing is they're just gaslighting Tim Roth and Naomi Watts. And then the gaslighting gets more and more severe over time. So like in the first scene, or I guess the first scene in which they shared a moment with Naomi Watts, they're basically just being baseline manipulative. And you kind of realize, oh, these are not good people regardless. And then the discomfort ratchets up from there. And the gaslighting is at its most intense in the middle of the movie, where every time something goes wrong or every time they hurt Naomi Watts or Tim Roth, they make it seem like it's their fault, which is kind of like a classic gaslighting technique with abusive partners and friends and stuff like that. Like I mentioned before, I love the song because I think when you combine the fact that you don't see a lot of the violence on the screen with the focus on the emotions with this song that, if you didn't know that John Zorn was a brilliant arranger and musician, the song comes off as kind of chaotic. And if you don't realize that it's actually a very meticulously planned out and performed piece of music, it seems like kind of this hateful, anarchic, how could anyone ever appreciate this type music, which I think is, I grew up listening to punk and metal, so I kind of grew up with people saying stuff like that about the music I liked. But that song, I think, makes people more uncomfortable than a lot of the physically or emotionally devastating stuff in the movie. I really like the cinematography. There are large swaths of the movie in which you see no one's face. Like when they arrive at the cabin for the first time, it's just tight shots of a bag being placed down, or tight shots of shoes being changed, or tight shots of people walking around the house, but all you see is their legs and then the dog, or it's the upward shot or the downward shot of the car while they're discussing the music. And then, another thing about the cinematography is the long takes. There's a long take at one point. Peter and Paul leave the house, and Naomi Watts is trying to get up, even though she is bound at the hands and the feet. And it just literally holds the camera on her trying and failing to get up into a standing position. There's lots of stuff like that. The way they build tension with shot choice, especially as the young kid runs away, I thought was really masterful. They don't really show Paul, who is pursuing him, at all. They just show all the places that the kid runs and all the things that he sees where he realizes, oh, I tracked water into this area, so he knows I'm here. Oh, here's the gun or whatever. Here's where I can run. Here's where I can hide. Just so great shot choice on that. Darius Kanji is the cinematographer, so I thought that was really masterfully done. Other than that, I don't have a lot. I'll say one more thing that I appreciated. The meta nature of this movie kind of took me aback the first time. I think I've seen this movie 3 or 4 times. The first time in the first viewing that Michael Pitt looks in the camera and says, "You want to be entertained, don't you? We want to make sure we're doing stuff logically." like this is entertaining. You know, that jumped out at me, but then the kind of ultimate meta moment at the big scene in the last third of the movie is really kind of fun too. That's kind of a big fuck you to the audience if anyone was actually watching this without the meta context in mind. And then with that in mind, I guess one last thing would be, it seems like for the most part this is a horror movie in which people are actually acting what seems to be semi-logically in order to do what is as close to as they can get to protecting their interests. I don't think they really know until the last little bit of the movie that they're definitely going to die by the hands of these guys. Like, they seems like they have a pretty good handle on the what they think is the fact that they can appease them for a good deal of the movie, but within that context, I think they acted how a lot of people would act. And maybe this movie is a comment on the concept of appeasement as well. I don't know. What worked for you in this movie, if anything?
Well, my favorite scene in the movie was the escape, chase, and hunting down sequence of the little boy.
Yeah, that was really well done.
Yeah, that was well crafted. Like you said, the moment where he realizes that he's been trailing water with him because he had to swim a little bit to get to the neighbor's house who he thought, he thinks they're still alive. Spoilers, whoops. That was a really clever, I understand how he's tracking me moment where, like, you might see in, like, an alien or a monster movie, perhaps, that I kind of liked. I think the kid was well acted. The way that they framed the shot while he's hiding in the shadows, just behind, like, random objects and stuff, and, like, maybe just a bit of his shoulders, like, in the light, so he's just a little bit noticeable. Things like that were really clever, which are very, I guess, more common in the horror genre, I would say. So it's nice to see them play with lighting like that, because a lot of other movies don't have that full-on blatant effect when they play with lighting, unless it's like black and white, really, for the most part.
Yeah, black and white movies have the luxury of doing that really intensely.
It's so gorgeous. And in this scene, whereas horror is at nighttime, you can really play with this style of light, and so it looks like it's fluorescent light because it's so white, to the point where you do get that black and white feeling as he's hiding. And I kind of really like that. I don't know if that was intentional, probably, but I really appreciated that. I liked the initial setup of these random, because this takes place in a time where they still use, like, flip phones. Cell phone service was not, like, super reliable, even today, at, like, beach houses. And by beach houses, I should say lake houses. Lake house service reception is not guaranteed or reliable. The idea that the cabin that you're at doesn't have a phone, but, like, people are just so trustworthy in these rich communities, someone knocks on the door and just approaches you with, like, an overwhelming sense of politeness, you're inclined to trust them automatically, and through just the name drop or the association of someone else,
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was an interesting setup. I thought Naomi Watts did a fine job acting. I like the scene. More spoilers. We're gonna have to spoil a lot in this movie. In the very beginning, I believe it's Michael Pitt drops the phone into the... No, it's not Michael Pitt. It's...
oh, no, that's Brady Corbett.
Brady Corbett drops Naomi Watts' phone into the sink and it gets wet, and so it kills the phone. But later in the movie, after they're kind of left on their own, the phone is back. Like, it must have dried out, which could happen with those old flip phones. But, like, it's kind of fucked up. Like, the speaker's not working or whatever. Something's, like, fucked up. And so, like, they take a lot of time to show Tim Roth with a fucking hairdryer just hair drying the cell phone looking fucking miserable. And
Yeah.
they really hold on that shot for, I'd say, like maybe 5 to 10 minutes, maybe. And I like that because it is so out of place in most conventional horror movies that it's a little bit funny, right? To
Yeah.
see that in a horror movie, which is something very rational and reasonable. At any moment, someone could kill him, but like he's just sitting there, kind of like crying because a tragedy. Well, you said the kid died, so his
Yeah, I already
son had
said.
just
And I
died.
already said we were going to spoil the movie, so.
Yeah, the son had just died, so he's just sitting there drying the that sound of the hair dryer, drying the cell phone. I like that. I like the. It feels so strange in a movie because on the one hand, like you said, like we want this all to be logical. We want this all to entertain the audience. When Michael Pitt says that, the whole drawing the cell phone thing is a very logical thing to do, albeit
Yeah.
like not really suspense building or grand in the genre context. It's kind of taking a
Yeah.
dump on it, and it's kind of funny. One scene that sticks out to me is when Naomi Watts, after the son had just been shot and what appeared to be Tim Roth had been killed or mangled in some way off screen, and they just show Naomi Watts like bound and crying in front of like while NASCAR is playing. And it's just so loud, the NASCAR, that you could barely hear her
Yeah.
sobbing, and then like just like go up to like shimmy up to the TV with her arms
Yeah.
behind her back and like turn off the TV like
That's part
with
of
her
that
arms behind
long
her back.
shot I was talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a very memorable scene, and like it wasn't particularly horrifying or brutal emotionally or anything like that. It was a little bit funny, that bit of quirkiness right there, and like, but it was
Yeah, in like a
still
sick way.
yeah, because you still remember the look of misery and sadness on her face, but
Yeah.
the act of what she's doing is kind of funny.
Yeah. And then right before that, there's just the shot of the TV being on with the cabinet surrounding it with just blood all over it.
Yeah. I'll echo your sentiment. I like the cinematography as well. I thought that was done very well. This really is like the cameraman's movie, truly,
Yeah.
because there are not a lot of edits in this movie. Only in the beginning, I'd say there's like the classic editing style.
Yeah.
where-
Near the middle and the end, it slows down in terms of cuts, it seems like.
Yeah, and even then, I always, whenever I compare horror movies, like right now, I'm spoiler alert for all you people who want to know our fucking production time. It is long. I'm editing. Let me just say this: I'm editing another podcast, and I always compare shit to Hitchcock when I feel it. This
Yeah.
has like a very Hitchcockian setup. The way that the long shots play out, where it feels like a play you're watching,
Yep.
felt very Hitchcockian in their dialogue, in the way they move about the room, perhaps. I mean, that's way more at the end, but there are moments of that in the middle, too. I guess that's about it for things I enjoyed. Were they trying to also make a joke about the setting and the family, the people who are getting attacked? Slasher films, those kind of like hostage movies, they don't really focus on like a really upper middle class family, right?
Yeah, it's like the dumb teenagers at the party or the,
Yeah.
the person who's left alone in the house or, I mean, I don't really watch a lot of horror movies, honestly.
Me neither. I can only think of tropes, which we will
Yeah.
get into with Cabin in the Woods. But if that was supposed to be like a meta joke on the setting and the people who are victimized in these type of movies, rarely is it the well-to-do or someone
Yeah.
almost unrelatable to the majority of the audience or to what would be a mass audience, right? I get that feeling from Hitchcock movies. There's a movie where like two students kill their professor and they're in like a coffin under a table where they invite all of their friends and like student cohorts to come over and like have a big dinner, a gala thing. There's only 2 cuts in the whole movie, which is like ridiculous for that whole movie, right? But they're very upper middle, well-educated people, because at the time his movies focused on like suburbia, the elite, or more like, more adult age type of people, right? Either
Sure.
the affluent, educated, or older. And so this movie has a bit of that sensibility too, where Hitchcock was doing it for an audience. This felt like it was doing it to spite the conventional trope of the target, of the victim. Is that fair to say?
Can you say that one more time?
I was getting a Hitchcock vibe that, like, because Hitchcock focused a lot of his movies on like affluent, educated, older people, his victims or his audience, both of which. This movie also targets affluent, older, like a family, suburban style family, but it didn't feel like it was doing that as a target audience like Hitchcock would. It was doing it to spite the horror genre more so, right?
Yeah, I feel like that's kind of in line with his views on violence. You know,
Right.
it's more like if I can get away with doing something as different as I can, I'm going to probably do it. But I don't know. I don't know how much this is meant to relate to the genre, because apparently he's on record as saying he doesn't think it's a horror movie. He said, I mean, and this is kind of what I like about the movie, because it's subverting tropes. It's kind of ironic that we're watching the other movie that we're watching. But he basically said he wanted to make a violent but otherwise pointless movie. So he doesn't really view it even as horror, even though it does very directly subvert a lot of horror tropes. I don't know.
That's interesting. Well, that's about it for the things I liked. Paul, what didn't work for you in this movie?
What didn't work? That's a tough call, because I feel like when I think about what this movie is intended to be, I can't really think of a lot of stuff that doesn't work towards that goal in a pretty good way. I do feel like most of the stuff that Tim Roth and Naomi Watts do is relatively reasonable, given the fact that they don't understand until the end that they're going to die. Having said that, I did take a little bit of logical issue with the fact that Naomi Watts was willing to flag down a random car. I feel like, obviously, these people are under extreme stress. They potentially know that whatever happens, this isn't going to go well for them. But based on their kinship with the neighbors, who we later find out are dead, it doesn't make a lot of sense that she wouldn't know someone else in the neighborhood or be able to seek out someone else. That's a little bit of a logical gripe. Technically speaking, I don't have any gripes. I would say that I think of the actors in the movie, Tim Roth is probably the weakest link. I feel like everyone else did a great job. I think he did a good job, but I think he's probably the weakest link. Like, whenever there's a neutral mood in a scene, it seems like he's kind of checked out, maybe. But when he has to go hard and be emotional and stuff, he does a great job. This isn't a gripe about the movie, but I don't like, and I actively don't like, and I think this is a great movie, I don't like how good this movie is at making me personally feel extremely uncomfortable. We've talked about this in past episodes. I really like violent movies. I really like gross movies. I watch videos of surgeries on YouTube all the time. I've seen videos that I would never wish anyone else to see, and you can imagine what I'm referring to when I say that.
Sure.
This movie truly makes me physically uncomfortable.
Why?
And
Why is that?
I don't know. That's why this movie is so amazing to me, is because usually when a movie has a moment of emotional intrigue or change or interest, I can pinpoint it and be like, that made me uncomfortable, or that worked this way for me or that did this to me. This movie just makes me feel uncomfortable. And
Can I take a shot as to why?
Yeah, I think before you do, I want to say the big thing about it is that you want to believe that if something like this happened in real life, you could humanize yourself to an extent to the attackers so as to minimize the negative effect on yourself. You want to believe you could talk someone out of stuff like this, but they try that and they try placating them. They try everything and nothing works. It's all just from a very beginning, these guys are bad dudes and they're going to keep fucking with you and it's going to get worse and worse and worse. It just, I don't know. When it comes to stuff like, if you imagine the prospect of like a Mexican cartel killing or like an ISIS beheading or stuff, you think to yourself like, oh yeah, this is bad, but you know, like that person could have avoided being in ISIS territory. And like, obviously it's horrible that they're getting killed or whatever, but like, you know, if you conceptualize it, you think to yourself, well, they didn't need to go be in ISIS territory, or, you know, these guys didn't need to get involved with the cartels. There were other options for whatever they could have gotten done. With this, it's like they are seemingly acting completely logically, placating these guys, thinking, oh, they're just stupid kids. We can convince them to not kill us, or we can, you know, placate them and they'll go away. Never happens. It's just emotionally, it's a slog the entire way through. What were you going to say for why you think I might be uncomfortable with this movie?
For me, a lot of the disturbance or that the feeling of unease came from the cognitive dissonance of having the two very polite, well-mannered psychopaths torturing and fucking with this family. They're a classic flip on the usual Texas Chainsaw or a Jigsaw style killer.
Yeah.
They're just very kind, and the strangeness that you get in the way they behave towards the family as opposed to their actions and what they're actually doing. And as you know, you can see their motives and like just the weird joy they get out of this whole thing.
Yeah.
Is what is disturbing. It's more that this is not a typical villain. These are not your typical villains. There's just something that always feels off. And I think it's them in the setting, them being as kind of like off, odd, and polite as they are. I think it just has to deal with the fact that they're well-mannered and well-dressed. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That, I think, it speaks to something inside a person who inherently trusts people who you assume are affluent, educated,
or well-to-do,
or nice people who speak nicely, you know? So I think it's just seeing that unfold. It's kind of like the Singing in the Rain thing in Clockwork Orange, where like you don't associate the song with a rape until you see it in a rape scene, you know?
And then after that, you can never fucking see anything.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Kubrick, you fuck.
Like, I can't hear that song without cringing a little bit now.
Yeah, same. It's such a great song.
Yeah.
Well.
Yeah, but so I think also it could be potentially a comment on, you know, the expectation of civility in people who are being trodden upon. Not to make this a huge political thing, but like Martin Luther King would tell people, you know, no matter what happens during this march, you're going to get the shit beat out of you, or they're going to fire hose you, the dogs are going to bite you. We need you to remain as civil as possible because they'll respond to that. And there have been other instances in history where that has not helped, where, you know, peaceful protesters are gunned down because, hey, maybe being civil is not the option here. And I think, you know, it bears mentioning that the one time they have, you know, story-wise, they have a leg up on Peter and Paul is when she momentarily stops being civil and shoots Peter in the fucking chest. Like, the expectation of civility is almost a subversive, hurtful thing that, governments and police forces and stuff like that put on to people in order to ensure their cooperation. But if there's one thing history has taught us, I'm talking specifically about the Armenian genocide and the Holocaust, people who cooperate and who are civil with their captors oftentimes get fucked over the worst. There's this comedian who I know of who talks about the fact that her grandmother was in the Armenian genocide, and they were talking about how, like, they lined up all the men, women, and children in this town, and there were, one soldier with a gun for every 20 people in the line. And she asks her grandmother, well, why the fuck didn't you guys just tackle them? And her grandmother said, no one wanted to be the first to die, so we all died. And it's like, a lot of Jews experienced that during the Holocaust. No one wanted to fight. They thought being civil was the better option. And those same people are the people who got screwed over the hardest. So I think it might also be a commentary on that a little bit.
But is that what deeply disturbs you?
In a way, that does disturb me. Like, as a concept, the fact that civility doesn't actually buy you anything, that does disturb me, yeah. Because, I mean, I don't know about you, but if I was in that scenario, as with the people in the Armenian genocide, I wouldn't want to be the first one to die, but also there is the fight or flight instinct in me that would want to be able to put some effort towards fighting against something bad happening. And the fact that civility doesn't buy you any leeway in that sort of scenario, or it might not buy you any leeway, the prospect of it not buying you any leeway is kind of sketchy to me. So that might have something to do with it.
Yeah, civil disobedience only works in cases where governments are not totally
oppressive.
Yeah, totally and entirely, like, violently oppressive.
Yeah.
With the intent to, like, well, if you don't like it, we will just kill you then. That doesn't work in those places.
To shrink that down to a personal level where, civility is so valued in especially, affluent culture.
It keeps the fabric of society together, man.
Yeah, like the fact that they did that is just, I don't know, it's scary. It's weird. So what didn't work for you about this movie?
Oh, God. Man. Ooh, jeez. The fucking dialogue, the fucking monologues, the writing just felt awful to me. Michael Pitt's whole just shut the fuck up for 5 seconds, man. He talks on and on and on and on in like this kindergartner's way of, talking down to the family and the audience. And that was really annoying. The whole little back and forth they have between, like, what could possibly be, like, a little bit of, like, a gay thing between him and Brady Corbett was also annoying. Because they kind of have those little, like, banter moments of, okay, he's kind of the bully, he's the idiot, da-da-da. It just feels like it was a first draft.
There you go. A first draft. Official first draft.
It's like George Lucas's thing about, like, so the first draft, we're just going to make this. It's like, oh no, the dialogue is terrible. That just took me out of the whole movie. And that was unfortunately, like, every fucking time he talked, which is what I would say probably around 60% of the movie, one of those two guys are talking or involved in the scene where they're talking. God damn.
I'm sure you're wondering, Captain, where this beautiful hunting rifle came from. Or does it look familiar? Did you ever go hunting with Fred? Can you believe that your darling little boy just tried to kill me with this? I know it's hard to believe, but it's the truth. And nothing but the truth, right, Georgie? What do you think about that, Tom? That's bad. What time is it?
After 11.
We should think about winning our bet, don't you? In fact, we should be very grateful to little Georgie here for helping us out so much.
Drove me batshit crazy. I was getting really frustrated with it. The moments where they weren't talking, by then I was so annoyed that I was not enjoying the movie because I was just so irritated with the bad dialogue. For the parts that I liked, those scenes were good. The scenes were good. The shots were good. The action was good. Things were moving along physically, right? It wasn't just like bat you over the head with the fucking script and just get all this fucking information and this, a lot of it pointless. Oh god. Drove me up the fucking wall. And as I said that perhaps this is like a deconstruction of the classic trope, I found myself very bored with the movie at times because there isn't a lot happening outside of Michael Pitt just talking at you for fucking hour and a half. Yes, they focus on the misery of the family and they really hold on shots to get that across, to kind of like, I don't know, make you focus more on their pain, I guess. But it's not shot interestingly enough, and perhaps it is, but it's just that I was so taken out of it by Michael Pitt's script that I couldn't appreciate it. So I don't know which one it is. Either there wasn't enough happening in the movie, or Michael Pitt pissed me off so much that it soured the rest of the movie for me. That could definitely be it too, because inherently those two things are intertwined because, you know, a movie needs a script, right? If I have like that much issue with what they're saying, how they're saying it, and for fucking how long they're saying it for, then we got a real problem. And you know, with the way I've reviewed movies in the past, that I always take issues. My biggest issue with most movies is that very thing. So, man, I really did not enjoy the vast majority of the movie as a result of that. And that's unfortunate, because that's the heart of my criticism, the things that didn't work for me, which unfortunately is the fucking majority of this movie. I feel bad, but that's what it is, man. That's just how I feel. Like you, I will echo the sentiment. I think Tim Roth's acting was a little weak at times. It seemed a little phoned in, but if he was trying to be kind of like the whatever dad, the whatever husband, yeah, he gets that scene across. But like, the only real characters to shine, I guess, is like Naomi Watts and the kid, minus Michael Pitt and Brady Corbett, but who I had that huge issue with the way they were written. Because I think Naomi Watts and Tim Roth, the character and the family dynamics enough are interesting to me. It was just the villains just pissed me off so much by the way they couldn't shut the fuck up. I felt talked down to the entire time Michael Pitt was talking, and that really infuriated me. At the very end, when there's that scene where after Brady Corbett gets shot and they fucking jump the shark, that bothered me a lot.
I mean, that scene is the entire point of the movie.
Exactly. And I understand why that's there, but I'm so frustrated with the characters at that point. I just felt like, oh my fucking god, and now you did this. You put me through all of this for that too. At that point, I put my hands in the air and just shook my head. And
I think that is entirely as intended.
Yeah, so there you go. It's meant to be an unenjoyable movie. And maybe not to some people, but like for me, as the regular movie-going audience, I guess. When they dump, spoiler, when they're on the boat at the very end, like at 8 o'clock, let's just say, that scene,
yeah,
that kind of made me happy. I was like, fucking finally, God, get it over with. Move along, please.
When do these guys sleep?
Not even that, but it was just like, can we do something now? And if the joke was that the denouement was so unrewarding, for me it was, because I just wanted it to just be like, just fucking end this already. I can't stand you people anymore. The characters of Michael Pitt and Brady Corbett, they're just so annoying. Just to see the movie kind of wrap up and like go on to its next, and then there was more kind of ending. I was like, finally, okay, good. Let's turn it off. That's how I feel. So maybe that's exactly what he was going for, but fuck, it was not a fun thing to watch. It was not very fun.
According to him, that's pretty much what he was going for.
Well, he got me.
He basically just wanted to piss as many people off as he possibly could, and I think he did that pretty successfully.
Ugh.
If you read some of the reviews, they are pretty scathing. It's not a lot of favorable reviews. Although I will say the reviews are, in general, they're like the most polar reviews I've ever seen for a movie. It's like, this is the greatest movie ever. This is the fucking worst movie ever. So I thought that was
I feel like
funny.
people who say it's the greatest movie ever are just trolling.
I mean, you never know. I think there is a lot of redeeming social and cinematic commentary in this movie, and if you can see that, it's worth looking for. And I think, the right critic could see a lot of that on their first viewing, even without the accompanying essay that Michael Haneke wrote about it.
I will boil down my final remarks to this, and this is going to come off as very harsh, but I feel like it is deserved for this movie, because if that was truly his intent, like, I feel a little bit better about having like a more scathing criticism of the movie, which is fuck this movie, it's boring and the dialogue sucks. That's how I feel. There you go.
Oh man.
Well, Paul, would you recommend this movie?
Absolutely. If only for all of the times that Bonehead by Naked City plays. It's a great song. Everyone should go look it up on YouTube. Maybe we'll play a little clip of it at some point in this episode. And also, for those of you who do listen to it, there is a man at one point doing a kind of rapid fire scream that is Japanese vocalist Yamanataka.
I thought it was Japanese.
Yep.
It just sounded like Japanese screaming.
Yep. That guy is very famous for having worked with John Zorn, and specifically on the movie, or on the on the song that we hear in this movie. Really interesting guy if you have a chance to look him up as well. All the musicians that this movie features in that one band are really interesting. So, yeah. Would you recommend this movie?
Fuck no. Stay the fuck away. Don't waste your goddamn time. It's
No,
so
please go see it. It's worth it. worth your time. All right.
We finally watched Funny Games. So, on the podcast that I may or may not be editing, you mentioned, oh, dude, we gotta see Funny Games, man. We gotta fucking watch this shit. And now, after all these years, we finally watched Funny Games. Like, oh my fucking god, dude. I hope
it was
you're
every
happy.
bit as glorious as we hoped it would be.
Oh my god. You got me. Spaghetti.
All right. Well, the next movie we're going to talk about is called Cabin in the Woods. Cabin in the Woods is a 2012 movie written by everybody's America's sweetheart, Joss Whedon, and directed by Drew Goddard. Joss Whedon, you might know from the first installment of The Avengers, or his numerous TV series that he has helped to popularize. Drew Goddard, pretty out there kind of guy, directed a few episodes of The Good Place, directed Bad Times at the El Royale, which came out in 2018, got great reviews. Basically, 5 friends who each fit a stereotype, let's not say stereotype, 5 friends who each fit a horror movie trope in one way or another, visit a cabin in the woods for a weekend vacation filled with debauchery and sex and drugs and stuff like that. Midway through the movie, however, we find out that the 5 friends are being watched by a shadowy corporation who, it seems, has the intent of ritualistically killing these youths, and that perhaps their deaths might serve a greater purpose than just, satisfying the whims of a wayward ghost or spirit or zombie or something. And the entire movie up to and including all of the dialogue, shot choice, and the meta aspect of having the corporation be in charge of their haunting, is sort of meant to be a send-up of horror tropes in an era where movies like Hostel and the Saw series have gotten a lot of play. Joss Whedon himself said that he wanted the movie to be sort of a subversion of as many of the tropes as they could find in horror, because they felt that the torture porn genre was getting a little bit too ridiculous. So they wanted to kind of explore the roots of modern horror. You see a lot of Sam Raimi stuff in here. You see a lot of other horror homages, and you see a lot of, in the end, spoiler alert, creatures from various types of horror movie. Is there anything I missed on that one?
No, I think that's pretty good.
I think that's pretty accurate.
Yeah. Also, should we do the spoiler warning in the beginning that we
Yeah,
are going
we're
to talk
going to
about this
spoil
movie?
this one pretty heavily, and also
Recommendations.
another. Yeah, we can do that first. I would personally recommend this movie. What about you?
Highly.
Yeah, I think it's a pretty well done piece of cinema, and
If you don't want to be spoiled, by
yeah,
all means, go
watch it.
Tune in, tune out, whatever. Go find this
Yeah.
online and give it a watch.
Yeah.
It's really, really good.
As of right now, it is on Cinemax, I believe. That's where I watched it. So if you have cable, you can get it that way.
I found mine on the dark web. So all you out there who know where the dark web can be found, go forth.
Absolutely. We are comfortable with you doing that, but we want to encourage you also to support the filmmakers and
absolutely.
try and find a way to pay for it. Just because this movie is very special. Before we go on to what we liked or didn't like or anything, a little bit about this movie. So the movie was filmed in 2009.
Ooh.
It did not come out until 2012. It was not, as many other movies are, it was not stuck in production limbo. It was not stuck in post-production limbo. It was simply changes at the studio that was going to distribute it. The release got pushed back like 4 times, and it kind of sat in a warehouse after it was finished for a little while, and nothing happened. Once it actually did open, it did pretty well. Had a production budget of $30 million, grossed $65 million worldwide. It did pretty decently in its opening weekend for how, much the hype had potentially died down. Got
bad.
great responses on. Yeah, it really could have. Got great critical response. Most critics really enjoyed it. It currently, I believe, has a 90-something on Rotten Tomatoes. Metacritic, 72 out of 100. And also Bradley Whitford and Richard Jenkins. I didn't really mention any of the actors, but they play the people who are orchestrating the House of Horrors, the Cabin in the Woods, and they are just real fun to watch. With that, I guess, that little extra bit of context, what in this movie worked for you, Anson?
Everything. I love this movie. When I first saw it, I thought it was like the best spoof movie you could ever ask for, because it does the movie that it's spoofing so well. It does that genre so amazingly well, while deconstructing and pointing at all the other things in the context of having the nefarious corporation or that organization pulling strings behind the scenes and like showing like, well, we got to do this, we got to do it for, spoilers, the old ones
ancients.
of the audience. Yeah, it's so funny the way they're able to frame this. Like before, you could just throw a virgin in the volcano. It's like, nah. It's
How
too
old do you
boring.
think I am?
Yeah, exactly. It's so good because it's able to take itself out of the key horror moments and like give you such a gratifying wink, because it plays into the context of like those 2 office guys or the 2 engineers orchestrating these disasters, or the locked doors, or the fucking cellar thing getting blown open.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
amazing to have that.
I think I saw
framed
this
that way.
movie in the theaters 3 times when I saw it.
Man, I would love for this to have like a re-release or something, because I
Yeah.
feel like horror today is like so cheap, and like, look at the stupid fucking camera.
Well, it's
Or,
basically
like, a
like how
blanket
can
will
we
come off the
make as
bed.
much of a profit as we can on a $10,000 budget?
Yeah. Oh
Like
god.
let's hire a cinematographer who owns 5 of his own cameras. You know, we'll pay him
Yeah.
for those, and then
Fucking
hire
GoPros.
actors. Yeah, we'll hire actors who don't want to be paid very well, but they'll get residuals. And then we'll put out this $10,000 movie that looks like it's all shot on security cameras throughout the house, and it's all a bunch of visual gags and screaming. It's
Yeah.
like, you know, that's not really that
so
fun.
low effort. This
Yeah.
is the opposite. It comes together so fucking beautifully. If then they were trying to make a comment about like the horror at the time, which was probably like a lot more Saw related,
It was
probably
all Saw and Hostel around this time, yeah.
Saw, Hostel, Final Destination, all the gore porn. Even then, like the very root of the gore porn is horror, right?
Yeah.
It does that so well to make fun of the roots, bring it back to the roots, while letting
Yeah.
the audience in on the fun of it all, of this corporate conspiracy, or rather like to keep the lights on, the motor running, not ending all
Yeah.
of humanity thing. And it's just fucking great. The way they play with like, oh, Japan has a spotless record, you know, and they have like their own like horror white floating ghost thing, like the classic
Yeah.
Japanese scary demon girl, little girl that they always
Yep.
do, a la The Ring or The Grudge or something like that. That shit is just so funny, man. This movie revels in its camp, and it does it in such a fun way, as a Quentin Tarantino movie would. It does what it apes so well. It's informed by all the things that came before it and said, now how can I do something just like that, but excellent, you know? Not trying to do a
Yeah.
shitty B movie, not trying to because of budgetary constraints where we just need to, you know, poop something out there for cash. It was like, I want to make a really good thing. And this is
Yeah, and I mean,
really
they
good
even
thing of
went-
that thing.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And they even went so far as to hire a cinematographer who is very adept at genre movies. So this is just a short list of some of the shit their cinematographer has done, and it's some of the seminal horror work along with some of the seminal comedy work. So kind of combining the two for this is kind of perfect. But he shot Evil Dead 2, Drop Dead Fred, My Cousin Vinny, Austin Powers 1,
nice.
Scream 2, Scream 3, Mulholland Drive, From Hell, Austin Powers 3, I Heart Huckabees, Drag Me to Hell, Scream 4, and then this. And that's just a
Wow.
short list of the movies he shot. So some of the great comedies of all time in My Cousin Vinny, the first Austin Powers, some of the great horror movies of all time, Evil Dead 2 is one of my faves. Scream 2 is amazing, as is Scream 4. So, you know, they got the right people for the job at every step of the way, pretty much.
Yeah. Having the guys from, or that one guy from Burn After Reading,
Oh, Richard Jenkins.
Richard Jenkins as like the engineer or the operator is just so
And
perfect.
his wonderful partner in crime, Bradley Whitford, one of the great actors of our day.
They're perfect. They kill that role.
Yeah, absolutely.
This movie
wonderful.
would not be as good if they didn't feel as natural in that space, you know.
Yeah, they
or
have great
in those
chemistry.
characters. Yeah. God, they got good chemistry. And like the office droll of Richard Jenkins, the canned kind of like hype excitement of Bradley Whitford trying to just be
Yeah.
like office A type personality, you know, like
It's very akin to his
so
character
good.
in The West Wing, if you've ever seen that.
I've not.
Oh man, yeah. Bradley Whitford's character in The West Wing is pretty much a carbon copy of his character in this movie, and he just does that particular character type really well. The kind of quippy, sarcastic-ish, never really truly sincere, but also very on it type personality. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's still in the context of office dronery, office drudgery.
Yeah, exactly.
The actors, every single one, this killed it. Minus, even Jesse Williams did a fine job. Everyone around him did such a good job that he just feels like a weak
Jesse,
link.
yeah, he was the only character that I like didn't like that much. His acting job, but
He has to be a really straight character, and for what it's worth, he's surrounded by so many strong personalities and like everyone else. That, like, it's
well,
okay.
that's the thing, is that like the only two like really sincere characters in the movie are his character and then Kristen Connolly, who is the lady who survives till the end.
Okay.
And they're the only two characters who are 100% serious the entire time. And she's a really good actor, and because of that, he looks bad by comparison.
That's fair enough.
Because like every other
that.
character has like an element of camp to them or an element of fun to them in some way.
Mm-hmm.
Like Chris Hemsworth is kind of a jockey douche, so he can be kind of like, less serious, a little more silly. Anna Hutchinson plays what the movie refers to as the quote-unquote whore, so she can kind of have fun with her like flirtiness and stuff like that. The Marty guy, he's a stoner, so he has to be a little bit like kind of jokey or like corny at times. Bradley Whitford and Richard Jenkins have jobs to do, but they're quippy and they, make snide remarks at each other and stuff. Everyone has an element of fun except for those two characters, and so when she's a good actor, it takes away from the fact that he's maybe not as strong.
I'd 100% agree. And piggybacking off of what you said, I fucking loved the stoner guy in this movie. That Shaggy from Scooby-Doo type of character, but like his really high-pitched kind of burned out voice, just is wonderful. God, does it revel in its camp. Fucking nailed it, man. The characters are just so good. Like, if this is the culmination of what Scream and all the shitty, scary movies came up to like be Cabin in the Woods, because thereafter I don't think there has been like another really great spoof movie that I can think of off the top of my head, at least. So. That peaked at Cabin in the Woods, it all came together. I love the story.
Actually, let me check something real quick. I might have an answer. The only really other good quality set of spoofs that is happening around the same time as this movie and was happening while this movie was being made is the Cornetto trilogy, the movies by Edgar Wright that were written by Simon Pegg. So Shaun of the Dead, Hot Fuzz, and The World's End. Each of those is like a really meticulously crafted spoof of a genre while also being a really great addition to that genre. But other than that, I can't really think of anything really, masterful and meta like this is.
Well, I guess it culminated with all of those movies then at that time, because maybe the competition saw at how good it could possibly be that nothing could come after, because Shaun of the Dead, Hot Fuzz, all of those are like in such a league of their own. This ain't a cynical cash grab. This isn't just a, do you remember this? Hey, look at that thing. Remember that? Kind of bullshit that it might have scared everyone else out of the water. It's like, well, we can't make money off of this anymore. Our very low effort referential trash, Yeah. So for that, it's fucking great. I think I already said this. The story is fantastic. I love it. I love that nefarious corporate overlord while at the same time being a little bit of a meta joke at like the film industry as a whole, or at least like the horror film industry as a whole. It's like, hey man, if the old ones aren't happy or the audience is not happy, the world ends. The world could be perhaps spin-offs or a franchise or more of the cash cow, like their livelihoods, if you will. Fucking great, man.
Yep.
It's done with such a knowledge and expertise of what came before it and why those things worked.
Yeah.
I like the monster characters in this movie. The crazy murderous hillbilly zombies. Fucking great. The little board of like all the other potential monsters is just really funny.
Yeah.
If you pause the frame, like some of that shit is just so ridiculous, it's hilarious. The ending, the climax of the movie, which just feels so wonderful. The idea of there being a monster catalog or something like that, and the way it's presented, and like how it all comes together. You get to see a little piece of like how perhaps their release into this world would have played out had it been like in the cabin, right? Like,
Yeah.
to watch the monster movie kind of unfold at the very end, where like it's all the humans with submachine guns and body armor and Kevlar helmets and shit, fighting like these unkillable motherfucking monsters that probably need some sort of like sorcerer or like priest, exorcist, or something. Like, there's just too much to like for any one wizard to fix. Because like, for the giant snake, you'd probably need like, the army. For the monster robot, you need an army. For like the wraith and the ghouls and the zombies and the vampires, you need like a priest or a vampire hunter or some sort of wizard. None of them could all be. There's no one answer for all these monsters, and to see them all fighting at once and fucking up everybody. And there's that kind of mutual understanding between like all the monsters. Like, for whatever reason, they're not killing each other. They're just going for the humans. Is so funny. So they're all kind of working in tandem.
When the dinosaurs escape from the cages in The Lost World, the second Jurassic Park movie. It's like none of the dinosaurs are actually eating each other like they would in the wild. They're just fucking up the humans because they know these are the fuckers who put us in the cages.
Oh, so good. And there's not even like a little wink or a nod of understanding between any of the monsters. They just don't give a shit about each other. Like, we're supernatural. Well, let's kill some humans. This is what we do.
Yep.
Oh,
it's our job.
It feels so good. It feels so good. That moment where like the wraith snatches the guy's soul out of his body is like probably the most frightening death, because you're like, ooh, you're like, he's getting tortured for all of eternity. That sucks for him. Where everyone else, he's like getting maimed, mangled, lit on fire by weird arsonists, or pulled apart by like crazy psychopaths, or like sawn in pieces by hillbillies, or eaten alive by zombies, whatever. That one guy who got his soul ripped out, he's fucked forever. So I was like, oh shit. That always stuck with me. I was like, oh, that's the worst one, arguably. Man, the ending with like the Silence of a Lamb style, like the director, the CEO, or whoever she is, coming out looking very much like the lady from Alien, or like I said, the lady from Hannibal.
She is the lady from Alien.
Ha! Perfect.
Sigourney Weaver, one of the first ladies of sci-fi.
Perfect. She was perfect. She was perfect for that role. She delivered it so well. She had an air of authority about her that like was just really captured in her minor dialogue, Yeah. It was great. It was so spectacular. Shot beautifully, lighting absolutely beautiful. Cabin setting gorgeous. Everything felt real, lived in. Yeah, I mean, like, for all of its like corny cheesiness, it felt totally authentic. I love it. The twist's excellent. The twist being like, because we spoiled everything already, the stoner guy being alive. Because I forgot, I'd seen this movie so long ago. I was like, oh shit, he's died. I was like, I thought he lived though. I'm pretty sure he lived. I guess it was Chris Hemsworth then, because like it's been so long. When he came back, it was great. It's like, oh yeah, I had to dismember this lady. What have you been up to? Just fucking great. Like, I
also like the fact that when they do that, or when they show his ostensible death, literally all it is just him and the zombie dude disappearing. They like leave the frame, and then you see a spurt of blood.
Yeah.
And that's it. So it's like, no one can ever say they misled you into thinking he was dead. It's like, that's a logical leap that you made as the audience, because most of the other people are in the process of dying.
Yeah, and they also show the thing getting broken, the blood sacrifice going into the tablet afterward. Yeah. So you're like, okay, in this movie, he is dead. The corporation also said he's dead too. There's like very little room for disbelief there, or for like, wait, I don't know about that, Yeah. Masterful. It's so good. It doubled down on like affirming the fact that you think he's dead. The merman scene I just love, because they like do this like romantic kind of like music. A swell happens where the merman crawls through the fog, and he just looks so fucking dumb and derpy. And
Yeah.
like the guy who bet on him.
Spend the entire movie saying like, "How sick would it be if the merman killed him?" And then they finally show him, and it's just like this fucking stupid-looking character.
Creature from the Black Lagoon style.
Yeah. And then
Like
he has a
rubbery
blowhole that
looking thing.
shoots out blood.
Yeah. Like when he's eating them, then his tail starts like thinning up and down, while the blood is just shooting from his spout. It's hilarious. Oh my god, it's so good. The comedy in this movie is excellent. Like, this movie is a joy. It's a joy to watch. You will laugh at it. You will still be in suspense because the movie, for its horror parts, are very suspenseful in the classical sense as to what it's kind of playing off of and aping.
Yeah.
Man, what a beautiful ride. Paul, what worked for you in this movie?
I mean, not to dampen our discussion, but it's similar to when we watched Fearless recently. I don't really have anything new that you haven't said. I think most of this movie works for me for the most part. I guess highlights would be the kind of character archetypes that they explain why they need them all and try and make it this huge profound thing, like, oh, if the goddess or if the ancient ones don't have the proper sacrifice, like, we can't do it, so we had to assemble you all and then like alter your ability to think rationally in order for this to all work.
So funny.
I thought that was great.
The
also
bimbo
the fact
hair
that,
dye.
Yeah, exactly. Like, oh, we're dampening her brain function with hair dye, and like
And increasing her libido.
Yeah, the jock guy is like not actually really a jock. He's a philosophy major, and we're just dampening his, brain function, and all that shit. I thought that was hilarious because like they never really give. I don't know, the character archetypes in these horror movies that they're taking off on, which honestly, I mean, this movie is more obviously taking off from the original Evil Dead. Like, the premise as a whole is just the original Evil Dead, but warped a little bit. And so as a result, it's like Evil Dead's a good movie, but it's good because it's a little bit bad. But then that movie, I mean, I don't know if you know the history of Evil Dead very well, but like
I've never even seen it.
Evil Dead is kind of a bad movie. I mean, it's a horror movie, and it's kind of goofy, and it's kind of done a little bit badly at times. And then Evil Dead 2, they realized, oh, that movie was bad, and people saw it because it was bad, so let's just embrace the badness. And then Evil Dead 3, which is called Army of Darkness, is like ultimate campy, wacky, ridiculous horror shit, because it decided, oh, it's better to just embrace all the bad stuff than it is to try and be good and fail and then have people just be laughing at you. Let's laugh with them. So this is kind of, I think the thing this is most close to is Evil Dead, and I just think they did a great job of taking off of that movie and logically extending a lot of the bits of it and the character types and stuff like that. I liked almost everything having to do with the corporation or the organization, whatever it is that releases the monsters. I liked the two guys who they show us, but more than that, I liked that the corporation grows as all of the characters do. So like you get more and more context for it in little bits, but none of the context is so especially far-fetched that you can't, go with it necessarily.
They had like a Weyland-Yutani kind of feel to it, right?
Yeah.
The reason why all this terrible shit is happening is some fucking horrible corporation.
Yeah. Favorite part of the movie is definitely Bradley Whitford and Richard Jenkins. I think most people would probably say that. Yeah, I don't know. I don't really have a lot more to say about the whole movie. I just think it's a pretty well done movie. I guess the last thing I'll say is we've already spoiled this, so it shouldn't be a big deal. The end of the movie, they don't get all the sacrifices they need, and so the big demon comes out of the ground, and ostensibly the world just ends. Like the end of the movie is the world ending. I thought that was probably one of my favorite endings of a movie I've ever seen, because there's always this want to have some sort of feel-good something at the end of a horror movie, like, oh, we finally defeated Freddy Krueger for the 8th time or whatever.
Right.
Oh, we finally sent Michael Myers back to his, whatever else. But this one, it's like, no, fuck you guys. This movie is done. The world ends. Deal with it. Fuck you.
The world in which this movie is, the whole thing is over. We're not making another one. It can't be done. The world ended.
I like that.
So
I don't
good.
like when they try and force,
the cliffhanger. What
they
if.
force a potential sequel, or the ending is like blatantly meant to illustrate, hey, studio, we really badly want to take the opportunity to make more of these, that sort of stuff. I don't know. It just bums me out when people do that. And it's one thing if it is a really incredible movie that does that. It's another thing if it's, any number of the movies that just do that for the sake of, hey, studio, let us do more stuff. And I think that these guys made a smart choice. And I think that's probably by virtue of Joss Whedon having written for television for such a long time. He knows some things go on a little bit too long, some things go a little bit too short. Just cut it off at the end and let it be its own thing. We don't need a bunch of movies with sequels and stuff like that.
With that mentality, though, we would not have been blessed with the gift of American Psycho 2, which we both know you love.
No, one of my favorite movies of all time. I don't know if we have a lot to say negatively. I think we both have admitted that. Is there anything you can think of that didn't work for you in this movie?
Nope. Damn near a perfect movie as far as I can think, with the exception of Jesse Williams being like just an okay actor. That's it. That's the only thing I could think of. Yeah. What about you, Paul? What, if anything, didn't work for you in this movie?
Well, I can't really think of anything, honestly. No, I've drawn a blank. I can't really think of anything that didn't work for me in this movie. And, just seems
everything
like a
from
pretty
down to
well
its
put together.
runtime.
Yeah, it's only 94 minutes. Very tightly written movie.
Super tight. Like, not an ounce of fat on this thing. It just feels so good.
Yeah, very little fat, if any, and just really, fun almost the entire way through.
Yep.
Well, we've already recommended that everyone see this movie, and those people who have seen it probably stuck around to, hear everything. So I guess with that, that'll do it for us this episode. Got a tight hour and 26 minutes. We'll see you next time, folks.
Yep. Goodbye, everybody.